I was signing my will at the bank when the cashier slipped me a small folded note. Her hands were trembling. "Don't trust your daughter," it said. I looked up. My daughter, Claire, was smiling beside me, too calmly. That's when I knew something was wrong, terribly wrong. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching, don't forget to subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. My name is Margaret Hayes, 71 years old, recently widowed. I thought I knew my daughter better than anyone, but that day at the bank was the moment I realized I didn't know her at all. The pen scratched softly against the paper as I signed the final page of my will. For most people, that moment would feel grim, a reminder of how close the end might be. But for me, it was closure. Robert, my late husband, would have wanted everything neat, fair, and clean. That's why I decided to leave everything to my only daughter, Claire. Claire, my sunshine, my reason for breathing these past 40 years. She was sitting beside me, chatting lightly with the banker, her golden hair catching the morning light. I remember feeling proud. She had her father's charm, my patience, and what I thought was a good heart. When we finished, the banker asked politely if I wanted to keep a copy. I smiled. "No, dear. Claire handles all that now." He nodded, but the young cashier at the counter suddenly dropped her pen. Her face had gone pale, and a moment later she slipped me that small, folded note. "Don't trust your daughter." My first instinct was to laugh. Surely it was some kind of misunderstanding. But the way her eyes darted toward Claire, the way her lips trembled, it felt like a silent plea. I tucked the note inside my purse and forced a smile. Claire was humming as she checked her phone, not noticing a thing. We left the bank like any other day, mother and daughter, arm in arm. But something had shifted. The air felt heavier. The silence in the car was different, like she was thinking something she didn't want to say. "Mom," she said finally, "you did the right thing. It's time to relax and let me take care of everything." Her tone was sweet, but her eyes didn't match her smile. When we got home, she helped me out of my coat, made tea, and put on that same soft music Robert loved. Everything should have felt normal, but all I could think about was that note and the strange, sharp chill that came with it. That night, as I sat alone in my room, I unfolded it again. Same words, same shaky handwriting. I read it over and over, hoping it would suddenly make sense. Don't trust your daughter. Why would a stranger write that, and why today? The day I signed my will? I looked out the window at the old oak tree Robert had planted for Claire when she was little. She used to play under it for hours, building fairy houses out of sticks and leaves. Now, that same tree stood tall and silent, like it too was keeping a secret. The next morning began like every other. Claire made breakfast, 2 scrambled eggs, toast, and my favorite mint tea. She hummed as she cooked, tapping her nails against the counter, cheerful as ever. "Sleep well, Mom?" she asked, her tone too light, too rehearsed. I nodded, watching her movements carefully. It wasn't that she seemed different. It was that she seemed too perfect, too smooth. While she poured the tea, I noticed something odd. The checkbook I kept in the drawer by the phone was missing. When I asked her about it, she smiled quickly. "Oh, I moved it to the office cabinet. You're always forgetting where you put things, Mom." Her voice was soft, sweet. But underneath it, I heard something sharp, like a blade hidden behind lace. I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, she'd been managing my bills since Robert passed away. But that note from the bank? It kept echoing in my mind. Later that day, I found her in my late husband's study, the one she never entered before. She was sitting at his desk, scrolling through his old laptop. "Claire?" She jumped. "Oh, Webbed. I was just going through Dad's pictures." Her smile was there, but her eyes flickered, just for a second, like a mask slipping. I didn't ask questions, not yet. That evening, as I walked down the hallway, I heard her on the phone. Her voice was low, almost whispering. Yes, it's done. She signed everything. I'll send the papers tomorrow. My heart clenched. Papers? What papers? I leaned closer to the door, but before I could hear more, the floor creaked beneath me. Her tone instantly changed. "Oh, hi, Mom. I was just ordering something for the bakery. Go back to sleep." I smiled weakly, pretending not to notice the tremor in her voice. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that note again. Those 4 words burned behind my eyelids. Don't trust your daughter. The next morning, when Claire left to run errands, I went into the study. Robert's laptop was still open. My hands trembled as I scrolled through his old files, contracts, tax reports, family photos. Then I saw a new folder, created just 2 days ago. It was titled Estate Documents. When I opened it, there were scanned copies of the will, my will, and something else, a second version, one I hadn't signed. This version didn't leave everything to Claire. It gave control of my entire estate to a company I'd never heard of before, Brooks and Lang Holdings, and underneath in the signatory line, there it was. My name, forged perfectly. I froze. I could barely breathe. The betrayal was no longer a whisper. It was right there, in black and white. That afternoon, I sat in the garden, pretending to prune the roses when Claire came home. She kissed my cheek and said she'd brought groceries, but as she bent down to pick up the bags, I noticed a faint ink stain on her thumb. Blue ink, the kind used for signing documents. "Everything okay, Mom?" she asked. I smiled, forcing calm into my voice. "Yes, sweetheart, everything's fine." But inside, something shifted. The trust that had once been my comfort was now my weapon. If she thought I was naive, I'd let her believe it. For now, I didn't confront her. I made oatmeal. I stirred it the way Robert liked. Slow circles, 3 pinches of brown sugar, a splash of milk at the end. I set the bowl in front of Claire and kissed her hair. She smiled, surprised by the softness in me, mistaking it for surrender. "Mom," she said, spoon-tapping the rim, "I have some good news. The attorney wants us to finish the portfolio consolidation this week. It will make everything simple for you." I nodded like a grateful old woman who didn't understand words like portfolio or consolidation. "Tell me where to sign," I said, and her eyes lit with relief. She thought my shoulders had lowered for her. When she left for her meeting, I called Henry. My voice didn't tremble. "You told me to catch her in the act," I said. "Set the table. I'm serving breakfast." Henry exhaled, long and careful. "Margaret, we'll do it by the book. We won't stop her hand. We'll let it write. I'll prepare a verification request for the bank and a chain of custody letter. I want a copy of everything she presents to you. No scenes, no shouting, just ink." "No scenes," I repeated, and felt Robert's steadiness return to my fingers. "Just ink." He gave me a name I needed, a name that turned the lock on the whole thing. Grace, the cashier with the shaking hands. I went to the bank alone that afternoon. Grace saw me before I saw her. She lowered her eyes, as if ashamed that the truth had slipped out of her hands the other day. When I reached her window, I thanked her without saying why. She understood anyway. "I shouldn't talk," she whispered, glancing toward the glass office in the back. "But your husband, he left instructions. We were told not to release certain transfers without a secondary verification from a person named on the account." She swallowed. "The name isn't your daughter's." "Then whose?" I asked, though I already knew. "Mine," she said, almost apologizing. "Robert trusted me. He said if anything ever felt rushed or wrong, I should slow it down. He left a note on file. He wrote, 'Grace will know.'" I felt the weight of the years in my chest, and also a feather lightness I hadn't felt since he was alive. "He always did," I said, "and so do I." We agreed on a quiet signal, the kind no one would notice. If Claire presented any document in my name without me present, Grace would ask for the secondary verification form C12. the one Henry had prepared, which would require my voice and a code. The code wasn't complicated. It was a word only Robert and I used for the kind of bread we sold to the first hotel that ever took a chance on us: sunrise. The next morning, Claire laid out papers on the kitchen table like a dealer setting down a winning hand. She had highlighted places she wanted me to initial. She talked about convenience and safety. She said the word caregiver 3 times in 10 minutes and smiled each time like it made her kind. I signed what Henry told me to sign: acknowledgement of receipt, not consent, small letters that looked like yes from far away and like maybe from up close. By 3, she said, tapping a calendar on her phone, we should be done. By 3, I thought, you'll be finished. Before we left, I called Daniel. I didn't tell him anything, only asked if he could come by the house later and check the smoke detectors. He laughed, teased me for worrying. I'll swing by after the station, he said. You never used to ask about those. People change, I said, and he didn't hear the rest, sometimes in one day. Claire drove us to the bank. She parked close to the door, like someone who knew she would leave heavy. Inside, the air was the same: cool, respectful, ordinary. Ordinary is where the worst things happen. She greeted the manager as if she had been born here, as if the building belonged to her. He smiled in that way men smile at women who have rehearsed the right tone. Grace stood at her window. When she met my eyes, she didn't look away. She called us forward. Claire placed the folder down. It was thick enough to bury a person. These require my mother's consent, Claire said, voice bright as a bell. We have a notarized copy on file. She signed last week. Grace didn't touch the folder. We'll use the updated verification, she said, glancing at me for less than a second. Form C12. Claire blinked. That's new. We update procedures all the time, Grace said gently. It protects our seniors. I heard the teeth behind Claire's smile when she turned toward me. Of course, Mom. They're just making sure you're safe. She said safe like a needle. Grace led us to a small room. She set the recorder on the table and pushed the documents toward my side, not hers. Mrs. Hayes, she said, using my maiden name the way some people touch your arm when they want to be sure you're real. I'm going to ask you to read this line out loud. I read slowly. I, Margaret Hayes, authorize the bank to verify the signatory of any transfer related to the account's ending. I paused, looked at Claire, then finished. With a code known only to me. Grace nodded. And your code? I waited a beat longer than necessary. It gave Claire time to imagine her future, just long enough for it to feel like fact. Then I said the word, sunrise. Grace wrote it on a card and slipped it into an envelope. Thank you, Mrs. Hayes. We can proceed. Claire exhaled audibly, relief falling out of her mouth. She opened the folder. Here's the consolidation authorization, and these are the new custodian forms for Brooks and Lang. She slid the top sheet toward me, already sticky noted where she wanted my initials to go. I didn't touch the pen. Grace, I said, would you do me a favor? Before I sign anything, could you run the standard check? The system check? Grace asked, almost smiling. Yes, I said, the one that tells us who owns what. Claire forced a laugh. Mom, we did all that last week. I kept my eyes on Grace. Humor me. Grace took the folder to the printer station. She didn't hurry. She scanned each page like she was counting prayer beads. The manager came to the doorway, asked if we needed anything. Claire gave him a practiced smile. Just finishing, she said, and the words sounded like a promise she couldn't keep. When Grace returned, she wasn't alone. Henry stood behind her in a gray suit that knew how to disappear in rooms like this. Claire's smile dropped an inch, then rose again, higher than before, too bright. Ms. Hayes, he said to me, thank you for meeting us here. I filed a temporary hold with the registrar this morning. Claire laughed for real now, sharp and clipped. On what basis? My mother's already consented. We have last week's signed copy. Henry opened a thin folder thinner than hers, thinner than mine, and set it down so that the top page faced Claire. Last week's signed copy was scanned from a printer at your home at 2:14 p.m. The metadata shows the document originated from a template owned by Brooks and Lang. Your mother was at her community center at that time. We have witness statements, and the notary stamp is, unfortunately for you, 2 months expired. Color rose in Claire's face in a square shape, starting in her cheeks and climbing toward her eyes. "This is ridiculous," she said, reaching for the paper. Henry didn't move it. He only tapped the lower corner where a small stamp sat, faint but not invisible. Grace placed another paper beside it, lines and headings I recognized even before I read the title. "And this," she said softly, "is the foundation document for the Robert Hayes Trust for Family Care, filed 7 years ago. Current trustee, Margaret Hayes. Successor trustee, Grace Noel." She coughed lightly. "That's me." Claire looked at me as if I had torn the ground out from under her feet. "You knew?" she breathed. You planned this?" "No," I said, because that part hurt and it needed to. "Your father did." She shook her head, tiny and violent. "He would never." "He did," I said, and my voice didn't rise. "He knew that love is a door and money is a lock. He wanted to make sure we never confused them." The manager cleared his throat, ready to be neutral. Henry slid the recorder closer to Claire. "You can continue if you like," he said. "Your next steps will be part of the record. Please remember you're being verified under C12. Claire stared at the little red light on the recorder as if it were a flame. Then she smiled, but there was nothing behind it anymore. "Fine," she said. "Mom, if you want to be dramatic, be dramatic. Sign or don't sign, I don't care." She stood up too fast and papers slid. A single sheet fluttered to the floor near my shoe. I stepped on it gently. The heading read, "Assisted Care Intake Financial Agreement." My name in the line where the resident would go. Claire's in the line where the guarantor would sign. I lifted my foot. She didn't bend to pick it up. "We're finished here," she said, and walked out into the bright lobby like a person walking into a wall she couldn't see. No one followed her. Grace sat with me while Henry explained what would happen next. Freezes, notices, clean copies, new passwords, an audit of every movement in the past 90 days. He spoke quietly, as if describing the careful way you remove a splinter from a child's finger. I nodded. I had been removing splinters my whole life. When we finished, I asked Grace if she had known my husband outside the bank. She shook her head. "He came to my window once a month. He always brought the deposit in a blue envelope. He'd wait while I verified the slips, and then he'd say, 'Take your time. I trust people who take their time.'" She smiled, and the girl who'd slipped me that note looked older. "He told me about the sunrise bread. He said he decided to trust me when I asked what made it different, and I waited for the whole answer." "Most people don't wait for the whole answer," I said. "No," she agreed. "Most people answer the question they wish you asked." On the way home, the car felt larger around me. I thought I would feel triumphant, but what I felt was tired. The kind of tired that comes after you carry a heavy box farther than you knew you could. Claire wasn't at the house when I arrived. The lights were off. The small clock in the hall ticking politely like nothing in the world had changed. I made tea and sat at the table where she'd set the papers that morning. The wood held faint imprints where her pen had pressed down too hard, little hills you could feel if you ran your fingers lightly. I traced them until the kettle hissed. When the door finally opened, she came in without speaking. She put her purse on the chair, then moved it to the floor, then back to the chair, like someone who had forgotten what chairs were for. "Mom," she said at last, and the word was smaller than it had been in years. "I didn't mean... I'm in trouble." I didn't answer. Trouble wasn't a new word in this house. We used to use it when the ovens ran hot and the caramel set too fast. We used to laugh when we said it. We didn't laugh now. She sat across from me and folded her hands so tightly the knuckles went white. "There were investments," she said. "A friend promised..." It doesn't matter. I thought if I moved things around for a little while, I could fix it before you noticed. Then the interest. Then the letters. Mom, I never meant to hurt you. I just needed time. I let the silence sit between us the way a teacher lets a mistake sit on the board, waiting to see who will correct it. She filled it. I love you, she said. You know that, right? I nodded once. I know what you think love is, I said. You think love is asking for forgiveness after you're finished. She flinched. Please, don't shut me out. I reached for the teapot and poured her a cup. The steam rose between us. I'm not shutting you out, I said. I'm putting a door back where you took one away. She stared at the tea as if it were an answer. What happens now? Now, I said, we wait. The bank will do its work. Henry will do his. And you will call every person you owe and tell them the truth. She shook her head, tears starting like rain that doesn't want to be seen. They'll come after me. They already did, I said softly. You brought them through my front door. We sat there until the tea went cold. When she finally stood, she didn't look at me. I'm going to my room, she whispered like a child who had been told the game was over. Claire, I said, and she paused, hand on the door frame. Tomorrow morning, we go back to the bank. You will apologize to Grace. For what? She said, defensive, rising out of habit. For making her part of a lie, I said. And for underestimating what a young woman with a rule and a note can do. She didn't answer. The door closed gently. I sat alone and listened to the clock, remembering what time used to mean. Later, when Daniel came by to check the smoke detectors, he found me in the kitchen holding the blue envelope Robert used to use on deposit days. Empty now, but still stiff at the corners, still smelling faintly of flour if you believed in such things. Everything all right, Mom? He asked, and I looked at his face, so much his father's that it hurt. Everything is slow, I said, and that's the way it should be. He hugged me longer than usual. When he pulled back, he noticed the faint indentations on the table where Claire's pen had dug in. He ran his thumb over one. What's this? Just pressure, I said. It leaves a mark, even when you don't see the ink. That night, I put the note Grace had given me back into my wallet next to Robert's picture. The edges were softening. The words were not. Don't trust your daughter. The sentence had changed shape in my mind. It no longer sounded like a threat. It sounded like an instruction about the order of things. Trust your husband who prepared. Trust the girl who trembled but spoke. Trust yourself, who learned to wait. In the morning, I would take Claire to the bank. After that would come the registrar, the audit, the long, clean line of correction. But for the first time in weeks, I slept. Not because I won, because I finally had the right people at the table and the right paper under our hands. Sunrise, Robert had written all those years ago. It wasn't a password then. It was a promise. And promises, when kept, make morning feel like it has always been there, waiting for you to open the door. The next morning, the air felt thinner. The kind of stillness that comes before a storm decides what to destroy. Claire didn't speak during breakfast. Her spoon clinked against the bowl, steady, almost rhythmic. I didn't push her. I'd already learned that silence was stronger than accusation. It makes liars uncomfortable. It lets the truth do its own work. When the clock struck 9, Henry arrived. Grace followed 15 minutes later, carrying a folder tucked close to her chest like a secret she didn't want to drop. They were both polite, careful, professional, but their eyes told me everything. Today was the day. Mrs. Hayes, Henry said, will need to conduct the full verification hearing at the bank. You and Ms. Claire must both be present. The compliance officer has been briefed. Claire's fork froze midair. Hearing? She repeated. Henry smiled thinly. Just protocol. You'll have the chance to explain the transactions. She turned toward me, her lips twitching between a smirk and a plea. Mom, this is absurd. Why are you letting them? I interrupted softly. Let's go, dear. The sooner we finish, the sooner we can rest. At the bank, the conference room smelled of paper and lemon polish. The blinds were half closed, slicing the sunlight into measured lines across the table. Claire sat opposite me, her jaw clenched so tightly I could hear the faint grind of her teeth. Grace placed 3 documents in front of her, each neatly clipped. "The registrar identified irregularities in these files," she said, her tone steady but not unkind. "We just need to confirm signatures and authorizations." Claire adjusted her hair and gave the same confident smile she'd used all her life, the one that could charm any teacher, any friend, any stranger. She picked up the pen. "I can explain every signature," she said. "Mom authorized all of this. She just doesn't remember—" "Stop." The word came from Henry, quiet but final. He pressed a button on the small recorder in front of him. "Click." "Yes, it's done. She signed everything. I'll send the papers tomorrow." The voice played softly, but the sound filled the room like thunder. Claire's face drained of color. Her own voice, calm, transactional, undeniable. Henry let it play for 6 seconds before stopping it. Then he leaned forward. "You were on this call, Miss Claire, last Thursday evening. Your mother was not. You confirmed completion of transfers totaling $480,000. Do you deny this recording is yours?" Claire's throat moved. "That's not fair. Someone could have—" "Manipulated your voice?" he asked, without changing tone. "Then perhaps you'd like to explain why the verification metadata aligns with your mobile number?" Silence. Grace looked down, avoiding eye contact. She'd seen this too many times. People folding under their own lies. Finally, Claire's eyes darted to me. "Mom, please, you know I'd never hurt you. I was fixing things. The bakery, the mortgage, the taxes. Everything was falling apart." I didn't answer, because I knew that was the most dangerous kind of lie, the one that starts with love and ends with math. Henry cleared his throat. "Miss Claire, we've already spoken with the holding company's representative. They've confirmed funds were being redirected to a brokerage under your personal name. There's no bakery. There's no mortgage. There's just debt." The word debt cracked her. Her hand shook. The pen rolled off the table. She bent to pick it up, and for the first time in months, I saw her not as my daughter, but as a stranger wearing her face. "Claire," I said quietly, "do you remember the first recipe your father taught you?" She looked up, startled. "What?" "Sunrise bread," I said. "You were 9. You spilled flour everywhere. You said the dough felt alive." Her lips trembled. "Mom, please." "He told you something that day," I said. "Do you remember?" She shook her head. I smiled sadly. He said, "You can't rush something that's meant to rise." Her tears came fast then, breaking the perfect mask she'd built. "Stop. Please, you don't understand. I was drowning. After Dad died, the bills, the house—" I didn't know what to do. They offered me a shortcut. I thought I could fix it before you found out. I nodded slowly. "And you thought stealing my name would save yours." Her voice cracked. "I just wanted to be free." "You were," I whispered. "You just didn't want to be honest." Henry gathered the documents one by one. Grace signed a witness statement. Claire stared at her hands as though they were no longer hers. The compliance officer entered, neutral and crisp. "Ms. Claire Hayes," she said formally, "you are under investigation for forgery, misrepresentation, and unauthorized transfer of protected assets. You may leave with your counsel or remain until the statement is complete." Claire's head snapped up. "You're arresting me?" The officer's tone didn't waver. "We're ensuring due process." Henry looked at me gently. "Mrs. Hayes, you're free to go. The trust remains intact." But I didn't move. I looked at my daughter, this fragile, brilliant, desperate woman I had raised, and saw everything we'd both lost. Not money, not property, but the simple idea that love meant safety. She stood slowly, her voice breaking. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Mom, please, tell them. Tell them I'm not a bad person. I took a deep breath. You're not bad, I said. You're just lost. But sometimes being lost hurts the people who tried to find you. She reached for me, but I didn't move, because forgiveness and permission aren't the same thing. When it was over, Grace walked me to the lobby. You did the right thing, she said softly. I smiled. Right and easy rarely live in the same house. She nodded, eyes wet. Your husband would be proud. I looked toward the parking lot, where Claire was standing beside a police car, head bowed, hair catching the wind. For a moment, I almost stepped forward. But then I remembered Robert's words. You can't save someone who keeps rebuilding the fire after you put it out. So I turned away. That night, the house was silent again, but this silence was different. It wasn't heavy. It was whole. I made tea, the same way I always had, and sat by the window. The moonlight pooled on the floorboards like spilled milk. When the phone rang, it was Henry. The auditors confirmed, he said. Every cent recovered. You're officially safe. Safe. A word I hadn't believed in for months. Thank you, I said. He hesitated. What will you do now? I looked toward the old bakery ledger on the table. Pages yellowed, corners curled, full of names of people who still owed $5 for a loaf. I'll bake, I said. Something honest. The next morning, I opened the shop for the first time in years. The bell above the door still jingled, the same sound Robert used to call the song of home. I mixed flour and sugar and thought about Claire. Sometimes love doesn't vanish, it just changes temperature. Maybe one day she'd walk through that door again, not to sign a paper or take a key, but just to buy a loaf of bread. If that day came, I'd serve her with a smile, but I'd keep the register locked. Later that evening, I found Grace waiting outside, holding a small brown envelope. Henry asked me to deliver this, she said. It's a note from your husband. He left it in the trust archives years ago. I opened it slowly. Inside, in Robert's careful handwriting, were 6 words. When in doubt, trust the sunrise. I smiled through the tears, because he'd known, even then, that the day would come when morning would mean more than just light. It would mean truth. The morning after the hearing, the house didn't feel like a courtroom anymore. It felt like a place where a person could breathe. I opened the windows. The curtains fluttered the way they used to when Robert put the kettle on and whistled off-key to make me laugh. I made tea, not because I needed warmth, but because I wanted a ritual that belonged only to me. By noon, Daniel knocked. He didn't ask questions at the door the way he used to when he was little. He just came in, kissed my forehead, and checked the stove like he always does now. Habit, responsibility, love. Sometimes they look the same. Everything quiet? He asked. Quiet, I said. He stood there a moment, hands in his pockets, as if listening for trouble that had already decided to move out. I heard from a buddy who was on duty near the courthouse, he said carefully. They released her to appear. No cuffs, just papers. I nodded. Good. We didn't say her name. Not yet. Saying a name too soon can make a wound bleed again. He sat at the table and lifted the old bakery ledger with both hands, the way a man lifts a family Bible. You kept this, he said. I kept everything, I told him. What I could. He smiled. It was a tired smile, but it had light in it. You want help setting up the front case? If you're really going to open again, those shelves need polishing. I'm really going to open, I said. So we polished. We scrubbed the glass until you could see your face in it, and then your father's face behind it if you believed in that sort of reflection. We found a tin of cinnamon that had slid behind the flour bin years ago. We decided to keep it like a relic. Too old to use, too precious to throw away. In the afternoon, Grace came by with a stack of clean papers, the kind of papers that don't hide thorny sentences. Temporary audit completed, she said. The trust is sealed. Any future transfers will require dual verification. She looked at Daniel with that bank voice turned soft. And you're on the notification list, if that's all right. Daniel nodded. It is. Grace set down one last envelope. This is for you, she said to me. Not legal, just kind. Inside was a printed photo of Robert, leaning against the bakery door the year we opened, flour on his shirt, grin too big for his face. Underneath, in Grace's handwriting, he trusted people who took their time. I placed the photo in the window where the morning sun would touch it first. That evening, when the street went blue and the porch lights started waking up one by one, I sat at the table with a pen and a blank card. I don't like blank things. They assume you have strength. Claire, the bank has done what it needs to do. I have done what I needed to do. I hope you will do what you need to do. Tell the truth, to them and to yourself. I am not closing a door. I am locking a drawer. There is a difference. If you want to talk, you may write first. Tell me what you are ready to be responsible for. Tell me what you are not ready to be forgiven for. Both are important. Mom, I didn't send it that night. I placed it under the clock and let it sit there. Some letters should steep like tea. The next week was ordinary in the best sense of the word. I ordered flour. I called 3 old customers. 2 answered and cried. The 3rd didn't answer and then showed up in person with a vase she'd been meaning to return for 6 years. Keep it, I told her. It looks better on you. On Saturday, I lifted the metal gate of the bakery and the bell sang the same little song. First day back, I baked 5 pans of sunrise bread. Not 6. You don't start with more than you can carry. People stood in the doorway and clapped the way people clap for boats that finally make it to shore. Mrs. Lee from the tailor shop brought me a thermos. Daniel stacked paper bags like a man building a fort around his mother. Cash only, he said jokingly. Trust only, I corrected. By noon, we had sold out. I wiped the counter with the same cloth I used when we opened. Thin, frayed, still stronger than it looks. An older man lingered by the door, hat in hand. You the lady who put her daughter in her place? He asked without malice. Just small-town curiosity. I smiled in a way that didn't invite more. I'm the lady who put the papers in their place, I said. The rest is between the papers and God. He nodded, chastened, and bought 2 loaves. That night, the house felt different again. Not hollow, not crowded, just right-sized. I set out 2 plates for dinner out of habit and then put 1 back. Habits are ladders. You climb them 1 rung at a time even after the roof is fixed. Around 8, the phone rang. Not Henry, not Grace. The ring you know before you answer. Mom? Claire's voice was smaller. A voice that had been rubbing against stone and learned its own edges. Yes, I said. I got your card, she whispered. I've been writing and throwing it away, then writing again. I'm not good at telling the truth all at once. You don't have to, I said. You just have to tell it in order. There was silence, the good kind. Then she breathed out like a person who has been under too long and finally finds air. I stole from you, she said. Not just money, time, trust. I used your love like it was a bank that couldn't close. I told myself I'd pay it back if I ever got rich in the ways I cared about. I didn't get rich. I got poor where it mattered. I let her speak until the river ran slower. What do you want from me? I asked. Boundaries, she said. It surprised me. And a chance to pay for what I broke, not with gestures, with months, with work. Then start with paper, I said. Write to the bank, write to Henry, write to me. 3 letters, 1 for debt, 1 for truth, 1 for the mother you thought I was and the woman I actually am. Send the first by Monday, send the second when you can read the first without flinching, send the third only when you're not asking for anything. She cried softly. I can do that. Then do it, I said. After we hung up, I stood at the window and watched the street glow. Daniel came in from the porch, where he'd been pretending not to listen. Progress? He asked. Paper, I said. He nodded like a man who knows fire, how you rebuild from the warmest coal, not the brightest flame. I'll be nearby, he said, however long it takes. Days made a calendar out of themselves. The first letter came on Monday. It was short and it didn't beg. I owe the bank. I owe the registrar. I owe you. I am making a list. I will not make you my list. I put it in the drawer where we keep warranties and marriage certificates, and the first drawing Daniel ever made of a house with windows too big to be practical. The second letter took longer. It was messy and honest in the right places and careful in the wrong ones. I wrote her back with 3 notes in the margin. Don't soften that sentence. Remove the word just. Add the word I. Truth has pronouns. The third hasn't come yet. I am not rushing it. Bread that rises too fast collapses in the oven. People do too. At church, Mrs. Alvarez asked if I felt lighter. I told her I felt accurate. She laughed like a bell and pinched my cheek. Accuracy at 71 feels like a luxury. It should be a standard. One afternoon, I found Henry waiting by the bakery door with coffee in a paper cup. He is a man who has seen every way a family can weather itself, and still he looked grateful. Your daughter has begun repayments, he said. Small, regular, documented. She asked for no favors. Good, I said. Favors are addicting. Work is detox. He smiled. You have a way with sentences. I had a good editor, I said, looking up at Robert's photograph in the window. Life. He raised his cup toward the picture in a small toast neither of us needed to explain. In the evenings, after the last customer leaves, I sweep slowly. I like the sound of the bristles. It's the sound of a place telling you it wants to be ready for tomorrow. Sometimes Daniel sits on the stool by the door and reads the paper like a man auditioning for gentleness. Sometimes Grace stops in for a heel of bread, the part people underestimate until they learn it holds the flavor of the whole loaf. On a Tuesday, a woman I didn't know came in and bought 1 bun and nothing else. She stood at the counter, twisting the paper bag closed and open again. My mother is difficult, she said haltingly, but she's still my mother. I nodded. The sentence stands even when it hurts. Do you forgive your daughter? She asked. Not nosy, just afraid. People ask strangers the questions they're too scared to ask the mirror. I forgive what is confessed, I said. I don't forget what is planned. She exhaled, as if my answer allowed her to put down something heavy. Thank you, she said, and went out into the kind of afternoon that makes people believe in fresh starts. At home, the clock ticks without accusation now. I keep the card Claire sent under the little porcelain dish where I drop my rings. I touch it when I take them off at night. Not superstition, reminder. Love is not a ring. It is the finger that keeps learning how to carry it. Sometimes I imagine a day when we sit at this table, 3 chairs, not 2, and talk about recipes again. Not papers, not codes, not locks. Maybe she will bring a pie she made without a shortcut. Maybe we will argue about cinnamon the way serious people argue about scripture. Maybe we will laugh the way women laugh when they remember they were daughters once and then learned they were mothers too. For now, I'm content with letters, bread, and a son who checks the smoke detectors even when the stove is cold. Caution is love in a uniform. Trust is love without a costume. Before bed, I open the window and say goodnight to the oak tree Robert planted for Claire when she was small enough to fit on his shoulders. Its trunk is thick now. Its roots know where water is. Trees forgive slowly. They do not forget storms. They grow anyway. Sunrise, I whisper. It used to be a password. Now it's a prayer. Tomorrow I will bake. I will count the register. I will lock the drawer I chose to lock and open the door I chose to open. I will answer the bell when it sings and tell the truth when it hurts. And when the day is done, I will sit with my tea and write 1 more line to my daughter. Love isn't what we take from each other. Love is what we refuse to take again. Then I will sleep, because the night belongs to those who worked for their morning. And I have. When people ask how I survive betrayal, I tell them the same thing I tell anyone who burns their first batch of bread. Start again. The oven still works. Life isn't about the recipes that fail. It's about the ones you rewrite when you finally learn which ingredients to leave out: fear, silence, and the need to be liked. I lost a husband once, then I lost a daughter to greed. But I found myself somewhere between flour dust and paperwork, between anger and forgiveness. And if you've ever been betrayed by someone you'd have died for, you already know. Revenge feels good, but peace feels permanent. Now, every morning when I unlock the bakery, I whisper, "Let today rise right." Sometimes the world listens, sometimes it doesn't. But I still bake. I still believe in warm bread and second chances. If my story reached you today, if it reminded you that love and pain can live in the same house without destroying it, leave me a heart in the comments and tell me where you're listening from. It means more than you think. And if you're new here, subscribe to Voices of Aunt May for more stories of women who lost everything and still refused to disappear. Your support, your likes, your shares, keep these voices alive. Until next time, keep your tea warm, your heart honest, and your will signed only by you. With love, Juliet Roberts.